Have you ever caught someone out who pretended to be an expert in your field? If so, when? I've got a friend who built up the facade that he's a doctor ever since we finished school. Never studied or had a job, just puts on a suit and wanders around the city. I think it was to impress people or something, but he believes his own lie now. When we hang out and he gives me medical advice, I have to remind him sometimes that I knew him before he added the self-proclaimed title doctor to his name. Oh man, I wonder if you'll get to witness his first lawsuit. In the prestigious field of old school bop it extreme, I once offhandedly mentioned to an acquaintance with a bad habit of one-upping that my sister and I spent an entire family vacation mastering the game until we were pros. He was all, "Oh, bop it? I bet I'm better than you guys. I can easily get up to 500 inches. So then I got to whip out my useless, pathetic knowledge and be like, well, that's doubtful, because the game stops once you get up to 250, so you obviously didn't get that far. I don't know if this counts, but I'm a retired psychiatrist. The number of people I've encountered online, in Reddit, claiming to know crap about psychiatry and that anyone with a hallucination is a schizophrenic is staggering. I saw a comment the other day claiming that epilepsy was a mental disorder. It's a neurological disorder, very freaking different. Yeah, I've worked in construction. 75% if new hires are frauds. Oh, so you know how to run an excavator? You are. Bunch of idiots. Everyone in construction is a freaking expert. Makes me sick. I keep my mouth shut and learn from everybody. Others know what's best over the boss. I once knew a guy who claimed to be fluent in Japanese. He could not read kanji or form any coherent sentences that weren't childishly simple. I actually am, not entirely but over 50%, fluent in German, but I get so nervous when I talk to native speakers that I come across as barely knowing the language, despite understanding exactly what they are saying to me. One time one of them said to the other in German, "Oh, she doesn't know it that well," and then switched to English, and I was just like, comma. Guy at pet store claims he is an expert reptile breeder. He then tells me how he has a clutch of eggs from his red-tailed boa in an incubator at home. Since his manager was standing right there, I turned and grabbed the care and breeding of red-tailed boas from the shelf we were standing right next to and pointed out the first sentence of the first paragraph. Red-tailed boas are live-bearing constrictor snakes native to South and parts of Central America. Just go have a look on our artificial to see legions of artificial intelligence experts who think they know everything about human intelligence because they read a few books by Asimov or Kurzweil and they start theorizing about how to stop the AI apocalypse. Also met a 15-year-old pretending to be an expert programmer working as a contractor to review PHP code from IBM. The crap people make up sometimes. It's impressive. For some reason I stretched the pretending only up to the word programmer and thought for a second that a 15-year-old scammer got a contracting job with IBM. I noticed an outline for technology course I had written on the website of a very big training company. Actually, a friend of mine noticed it and sent me the link. One of the clues that I knew it was mine is that I had developed some very specific terminology and models that were cited in the outline. I contacted the training company and they assured me that the course and materials had been developed in-house by their resident expert in the field. I registered for the course and received a copy of the course materials. They were identical in content to mine, just reformatted with the company template and all references to me replaced by references this so-called expert. I contacted their legal department who promptly told me that if I continued with this that they would sue me for stealing their intellectual property since my material was the same as theirs. The ironic thing is that I had published the material with the proviso that it could be freely used as long as it was reproduced in its entirety with no modifications, retained my copyright and license notice, and made it available free of charge. My lawyer pointed it out to their lawyer who promptly told us that we were in a world of hurt stealing their IP when my lawyer pointed out that published copies of mine version predated their earliest version by 5 years. All I was asking was they abide by the terms of the license. The next day all of the references to that course disappeared from that training company's website. Even more impressive, all the references to their in-house expert in the area also disappeared. TL. DR. An incompetent network engineer snuck into a management position on an important project and managed to fake it 4 weeks before being sacked on the spot. It shouldn't be possible to fake your way into a senior networking gig at an S&P 500 company, but I am in awe of this guy's talent as a bullshitter. Several weeks into the planning phase with one of my clients again, S&P 500 company, they foist a new PM on us, who immediately starts throwing wrenches in the works. Didn't realize until later that he was trying to buy time while he figured out what was going on. He ruined a month's worth of work on an important network migration before I realized he had no idea what he was talking about. It finally clicked about 5 weeks in when he insisted we get on the phone to go over some things. I was talking offhandedly about migrating to the new security equipment, and he cuts me off with, "Why? Why what? Why are we changing the firewall? Were we planning on doing that? Couldn't we save time by using the one we have?" Some background here. The new firewall? Totally the entire reason for the migration. Hold on a second for me. I'm gonna check my notes. Mute line. Literally start yelling at the top of my lungs. Pulling hair. Hyperventilating. Borderline panic attack. Okay. Pull it together. Deep breath. Unmute line. You know what? You might be right. I'm gonna make a couple of calls to look into that. Immediately dialed the account manager on our side and told him what was going on. He tells me to hold and then comes back online 2 minutes later with, to my shock, the networking CTO on the client side and says, "Tell him what you told me." The hair stood straight up on the back of my neck. I meander into the issue as vaguely as possible, generally outlining my concerns and being super polite and PC. The guy stops me, says, "No need for that. I prefer straight talk. Tell me what you told him." "Okay, your network engineer has been intentionally undermining our project to slow things down to a level he can cope with, is constantly confused, and has never spoken intelligently on any subject touching on his position." Right then, I was starting to have suspicions myself. He was saying things that weren't lining up and then blaming it on you guys. Now I know where the problem is. 20 minutes later I get an email that the guy is no longer with the client's company, and that a new PM will be assigned in short order. I spent about 4 hours feeling guilty as heck until it clicked that the guy had tried to pin his incompetence on me and my team while fumbling around in a position I'd be surprised he even knew existed before he tripped into it. I could call myself an entomologist, insects expert, and a few months ago a guy shows up at my doorstep saying, "Hello, I'm an entomologist sent by the district to repertoriate the xylophages, wood eating, in the area. Do you mind if I check the wood structure of the house?" Me, glad to meet a fellow insect enthusiast, invite him in, asking a shitloads of questions about his interest. As I told him my job, he looked at me with sad eyes, and telling me to let it go, went out and back to his car. I was curious as to what happened, so I googled what I recalled of the name of the company, and after a few minutes I understood that I had just met a salesman who tried to scam me. The point was to make me believe my house was infested, and to sell me the work to eradicate the infection. He just realized that was not going to be possible with me, I guess. People who talk about investing because they just finished watching Wolf of Wall Street yet have never made a trade in their life. Same friend gave me advice on taxation, referred to the tax office as the IRS. We live in Australia, it's called the ATO. Back when I was in nursing school I was in a clinical rotation at a local hospital. A nurse on the floor was going to be inserting a catheter and offered to show me. She immediately violated the sterile field and proceeded to tell me, "This is never really sterile in real life." I told my clinical instructor who blew her gasket. The tough part was that I didn't know whether to take the nurse at her word or not. I was so new and I knew that some things were going to be different in practice versus in school. I'm glad I trusted my gut and told my teacher. By now I've probably inserted 500 plus catheters. I've rarely broken sterility, but when I have I simply start over. As a barman, I handed over a drink to a disgruntled customer who told me I was in breach of contract because I'd given her a red wine instead of white. Without the snotty and highly serious attitude, I would normally laugh it off, apologize, make a futile joke at my own expense and get on with me life. Instead, I informed her that due to Boots vs Pharmaceutical Society of Great Britain 1953, the contract wasn't completed until I accepted payment, and thus we were still in a period of negotiation. Studying contract law had never been so satisfying. All the time on our legal advice, so many of the posters there are insurance workers or cops or businessmen with lots of legal experience. They don't seem to comprehend the difference between explaining that this is a complicated mess and it's going to cost a lot to resolve as compared to frick you, this party is obviously in the right and how dare you say otherwise. I am a lawyer. People will almost always argue with you about random legal matters and just assume the law is whatever makes sense to them. Everyone who's ever played a video game seems to think they're an expert on programming. My cousin's kid is convinced he knows programming and that he codes all the time because of Minecraft Fassapum. To be fair, he's like 8. Dear God, so many marketing people, it's unbelievable. You can easily wing your way through marketing interviews if you've read some lit on the subject, but it shows in their work very quickly. Him. Yeah, I used to serve in the army. Me. Cool. What was your MOS? Him. It's classified. I caught someone who claimed to be an expert on pipe organs because he wanted to chair a church committee that was about to spend over $1.75 million on a new instrument so that he could take credit for the project. After asking him the differences among principal, flute, reed and string stops, or about organs of Bach's time, I discerned that he knew nothing except how to turn the organ blower on. Adding that to my list of euphemisms. I was in a staff meeting and my boss was yammering about stupid crap he does not understand, because his boss was in the meeting as well. He started talking about the vaccination for Hep C. I corrected him and said that he meant Hep A. He said I was wrong. His boss agreed with me. We work in public health and he is an idiot. Then he hated me viscerally and made my life heck, so I got another job. And though your life was heck then, you're now a generally happy lady. As a historian all the freaking time, every C thinks they know more than me just because they watched a 5th grade level podcast one night. Many software developers I've met and or worked with, not maliciously, they really think they're at that level instead of entry-level novices. I've seen this with 2 web developers where I work. I wish they would let me interview and I could catch them right off the bat instead of them getting duped and then finding out later all the person knows is a minimal amount of HTML, WordPress, and how to Google. Just because you made a cool website for your fraternity using WordPress does not mean you are a full-blown web developer. Once at an ISP I was working at, we hired a guy who on paper was an IT expert. He had multiple Microsoft certifications including the MCSE. He lasted 3 days. He got the nickname "Must Consult Someone Else." Not an expert in Italian by any means, but I had been learning for a little while for a trip I took to Italy. I was at work and this guy at one of my tables, I am a waitress, said, "You know, I helped pick out the wines that would go into every store for this company. Didn't give a crap, but I am in America so I have to act like I do for money." So I entertained his ego and replied, "Really? How did that work?" He then told me, "Well, they flew a few of us out to Italy to sample at vineyards and pick the best ones." Now I was interested and asked if he spoke Italian and he said that he was fluent. I like to give people rope to pull on to see if it is all balls, so I pretended I didn't know any Italian and asked how to ask for a glass of wine in the language, and the next thing that came out of his mouth was complete gibberish in a cheesy Italian tone. He would have been more convincing if he said, "Mozzarella Parmesan pizza." Saw him come back a few times and every time he mentions that he helped choose the wines and asks for samples. But shouldn't he know what they all taste like? People are weird. The same kind of thing happened to me. I worked a summer at GameStop and someone came in to buy COD. He mentioned at some point that he was Italian and worked for Ubisoft. So, being a fairly fluent speaker of Italian at the time, I asked if he liked working there. He said that he spoke Italian, not Spanish. I work with firearms, as well as archery equipment. Most of my work deals with hunting, or other shooting sports. Aside from manning our shooting ranges, I also instruct classes and take folks out on managed hunts. I often encounter so-called experts when dealing with customers. That's part of the job though. However, the worst expert I encountered was Ricky. That's not his real name, but that's what I'm gonna call him. Ricky applied to help part-time. We didn't have many candidates with firearms experience, so pickings were slim. Ricky claimed to have been a Marine who had extensive firearms knowledge and had grown up hunting. We made the mistake of not verifying this. As soon as I spent more time with Ricky, it became clear that he was full of crap. First, he constantly bragged about bucks he had shot. He showed me pictures, but for some reason he was never actually in the photos. Ricky also insisted on helping out at classes, where he would undoubtedly give someone the incorrect information. One day Ricky came in and said he needed to talk to me. I said, okay, what's the deal? Ricky explained that a customer on the firing line was shooting ammo that wasn't legal for a non-military or former military member to own. Ricky was referring to surplus 5.56 rounds with a green tip. These are not illegal. I was teaching a youth deer hunting class one day. Ricky was supposed to be there assisting me, not with instructing but with setup and breakdown. While explaining shot placement on a deer, Ricky interrupted me and informed the children that I was wrong and that you should shoot deer in the spine and not the vitals. WTF, Ricky. It wasn't my field, but I knew a guy who pretended to be a math tutor for some time to get high school girls. Not sure how he winged it for so long. Maybe the girls he tutored were so dumb. Not sure how he winged it for so long. He pretended not to be creepy. They can plug in a router and the internet is available. Suddenly they are pretty good with computers. My degree and certifications were all a waste of money, I've been told, because YouTube can teach you this stuff. Data marketing specialist. They would never be caught. We're all too shy to call someone out on bad code, and there's so many ways of doing the same thing that it's plausible they're not freaking up. I'm not an expert in the field, but I know a lot more about it than the average person. I've had two dudes try to impress me by claiming to know all of quantum mechanics. Now, I got my bachelor's in physics and took 2 courses in QM, and interned at a quantum information theory lab. I wouldn't even have the balls to say I know basically all of quantum mechanics. I guess they thought that it was esoteric and brainy enough to impress me, but instead I was just kind of embarrassed for them. They were bragging to the wrong girl. Also, one further tried to claim that he believed quantum mechanics was not real. I don't even remember his justification for it. I just zoned out because he was so wrong. The only thing I remember from quantum mechanics is a quote, "If you think you understand quantum mechanics, you don't understand quantum mechanics." I work in manufacturing, in a small factory making medical devices. Yes, no two companies make the same product, but it should be common sense on how to use a torque driver if you've spent the last years as an assembler. The amount of people that have come and gone that in all honesty had no idea on how to work on a line is amazing. Insurance salesman. Most assume that I know crap about insurance and investing, even with all the information available today. It's always, but this investment scheme can reap you double the money in X years. Yeah buddy, in a perfect market it would. Insurance salesman here. In fairness, even with all the information available today, most people don't know crap. A good salesperson will know enough to go off script once a potential customer shows they do have a clue, but assuming they don't will do you more favors in the long run. Apparently they're level 60 in League of Legends. A girl once said I had a small dong without having seen it. We just know. I was working for an agriculture company in the UK. One day one of my colleagues comes and tells me there's a gentleman outside who wants to speak to me. So long story short, I went to go speak to this guy and he starts spewing all this knowledge about farming, etc. I said to him, "Look mate, the previous shift warned me about you. You're full of crap. Now get out of my field." "Look mate, you're full of crap. Unless you're going to fertilize my crops, get out of my field." This reminds me of a story in the book Catch Me If You Can that never made the movie. Frank Abagnale avoided airline pilots when he was wearing his uniform, but one day a pilot sat down next to him in an airport restaurant. After some small talk, the pilot asked him what kind of equipment he was running. Frank didn't know this is how they ask about each other's planes, and he answered, "General Electric." The pilot's reaction told Frank he screwed that one up, so he got away from him in that airport quickly. I work in the HR department of a public hospital. A few months back we were filling a position titled senior pharmacist. A number of applicants were interviewed, but one in particular stood out. He couldn't answer basic questions about medicine, pharmaceuticals, why he wanted the job, etc. I knew something was up with this guy. After a background check, it turns out he dropped out of secondary school, high school in US, and was working at a fast food joint the past 2 years. It still baffles me how some people can just put BSc in pharmaceutical science on their resume and think they will be able to do the job, let alone get it in the first place. Also, I realize I am not an expert in pharmaceuticals like this guy claimed to be, but you get my drift. So get this, we were watching SpongeBob, and he didn't know the campfire song. Campfire song. Everyone either claims to know nothing about mattresses or everything about mattresses. Surprisingly, even many mattress salespeople can be awfully uninformed about the product. I'm not in the field, not really in any field, but a kid in my Spanish class once told me that Alienware are best computer, they have 4 i7. In China there are computers with 1000 processor. He 100% believed what he said. No matter what I tried, I couldn't convince him he was wrong. Everyone thinks they are an economist. Was assigned to work with an American girl on a translation. She claimed to be nearly fluent in French, having spent a year in Paris. Thank God, I thought, this will be nice and easy. Nope, if she lived in Paris, she must have spoken English the entire time. Her English to French translations looked like they were from Google Translate. With French to English, she'd turned them in half untranslated. She usually blamed the source documents for being too poorly written to translate. They were for an NGO working on the ground in another country, so they were needed straight away. I ended up having to do everything for her. After several weeks, my supervisor talked to me. It was quite obvious she wasn't doing any of the work, and tried to get her fired. Nope. Turns out she was someone's niece. Had to do twice the work of other teams myself. Our translation was done 4 months later. Never have to see that be again. I've spent years in the automotive industry, and I meet a number of so-called experts every day. They give themselves away with the phrase, I read on the forums that, even when you are knowledgeable about something, you can still run into things you don't know. I tell people I've read this on a forum often because I simply don't have a way to validate it. That being said, I'm open to other opinions info. I don't think reading the forums or admitting to it is telling of something who is incompetent. There are so many people claiming to be nutritionists on Reddit lately. Also, every single personal trainer ever. Anyone can be a nutritionist. Dietitian is the protected title. Anybody with an academic background in history who is also on the internet can probably say yes to this. Even with my area of expertise being pre-1917 Russian history, this has happened to me multiple times on just general internet forums. In retail, every other person who walks through the door pretends to be an expert and thinks they know my store's policies and what I cannot do more than I do. People who have worked in retail themselves are actually the worst and give me more crap than any other customer, even though you'd think that they'd know what the job is like and would give other retail workers a break, but nope. Any problem they haven't. I used to work in retail at some place for however many years, so don't think I don't know, because I do. Exact same with bar work. Especially cocktails. Everywhere does them differently, so if I don't make it the same way they do at their bar, it's all oh, that's not a real one. Frick off. Not so much an expert in my field, but I love catching those know-all car show guys. I used to have a 1985 Volvo 245 deciliters. I had lowered it, changed the hood, new wheels, driving lights, roof rack, wood steering wheel, new headlights, etc. Looks nothing like it did when I bought it. One year at the yearly Davis CA Volvo show, a guy attempted to tell me he used to own my car. I asked him where he lived, why he thought that, etc. All of which were things that I personally did to the car. I also then dropped that I bought the car from a guy who lived in Washington and that I had the papers all the way back to 1985 for the car's entire life in Washington. The guy who claimed to own the car, and was adamant about it, had never lived outside of California. Same guy, later in the day, kept referring to the Volvo 1800 ES as the P1800 ES. I politely corrected him that there is no such thing as a P1800 ES. The P1800 only came in 2-door models, not the shooting brake hatchback, and the P meant it was manufactured by Jensen in the UK for Volvo. After Jensen's quality was too poor for Volvo's tastes, Volvo took over and started making the cars in Sweden. Those are 1800Ss. The S is for Sweden. The 1800 ES was never manufactured by Jensen at all. I was on the line with a vendor who was having trouble doing some average crap on our app. I mean, my mom could do it with limited instruction. So the guy on the other line is trying to talk to me about coding. Completely guessing, incorrect, what type of framework our app runs on, etc. I was buttering him up and asked what his degree was in. He said, computers. You have been visited by the romantic doggo. Comment love is magic so you never fall in the friend zone. Like and subscribe you magnificent person.